Welcome to my very first episode of Skip to the Point. My first guest on this podcast is Andy Whyte. Andy is an author and the founder of MEDDIC. In this episode, we talk about how this podcast came to be. We talk about how MEDDIC could be the science to the art of trusting your gut. We talk about ways of qualifying out and why it's one of the hardest things to do in sales. And lastly, we talk about how no one cares about your product. They care about how you can solve their pain. I'm so excited for this episode. And with that, let's skip to the point. Andy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very, very much. This is great, isn't it? We've been talking about this for a little while.
I know.
Here we are.
Yeah, here we are. During this time, a lot of people were giving me really great advice. And a lot of people sometimes were ghosting me or not responding to me. And I just feel like you just blew it out of the water and you just opened that door and said, walk on in. So I appreciate you so much for all your guidance during this time. And with that, with your guidance, I was just curious, you suggested a podcast. What advice do you have for people starting a podcast? Why is it important for people in sales to start a podcast?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's no shortage of people starting podcasts for sure at the moment. And I the way I think about it is people should think about podcasts and media and all those types of things a little bit like we used to think about the radio. You would never be concerned if you'd missed, an episode of the Howard Stern show or whoever your favorite radio DJ is. You just tune in when there was a topic that was on that you'd heard about, or maybe just when you're in the car or something like that. So I think this idea of just tuning in when things are on, things that interest you, is how we should think about podcasts. So it's more about the attention than anything else. But when it comes to something you touched on a second ago, which is this idea of people out there who are driven, they want to find out ways they can improve. Mentorship is obviously a really popular thing to do. The problem I've always got with mentorship is, by nature of the people that you want to be your mentors, they are the ones out there doing it at the top level. And they're also pretty busy because of that. So it's always this difficult challenge, this balance you have to find of what do you bring to the mentor in return for them giving you their advice. And I think that's one of the things that podcasting can really, really help with, because if you can go to somebody and say, hey, I recognize you're the best at negotiation, you're the best at habit building, whatever it is, and be able to elevate them at the same time as learning from yourself, and then, gifting to an audience that can tune in and learn from them as well. That's obviously a win. That's like a triple win, not just a double win. So that's why I'm always a big fan of this in today's world.
If you're saying, I want to give you the opportunity to give me advice and this platform, yeah, you're right. It could really help with growing that connection base.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. I love that. So with that, I want some advice from you. Okay. I'm just starting out as an account executive at a new company, and I obviously want to be the best. I want to hit quota. I want to exceed quota. Yeah. What's some advice you have for me?
Yeah, what's some advice? So I always think when I get asked this question, particularly from people that are, like in the circumstance that you're in, you're in a new role and you're relatively new to the world of sales, the grand scheme of things. What are the things that I kind of wish that I know now that I wish maybe I knew then, but maybe I believed more? And one of those things, big time for me, is to trust my gut. And actually, that's being a relatively new CEO as well. That's carried on into other roles in leadership where I'm like, actually, I really should trust my gut. And so, but in sales, it really comes back to that idea of being using your intuition, really, your understanding, because when you're sat opposite a customer, whether it be on Zoom or whether it be in person, you can really get a good feel for their body language. All these things that we know are so important in how we communicate. And you can use that intuition to decide, am I in a good position? Am I in a bad position? And make the right call of what the next best action to do based on that. So trusting your gut is always a huge thing for me. And then where my world comes in of things like MEDDIC is that you can then use that as the framework to kind of give the science to kind of the art of your gut. So you can kind of start to put some logic behind those decisions. So things, for example, if you're thinking in your gut, it doesn't feel like this opportunity's got legs. It feels like I can't see my way we're going to make progress here. Then you can look to, the methodology like MEDDIC to go, yeah, actually, I don't have a great champion, or we're not really differentiated in the decision criteria, whatever those things are. So you can then make that call, trust your gut. This isn't a real opportunity. This isn't worth my time. There's a flip side to this as well, which doesn't get talked about enough, because I feel like sometimes in sales, we want to be We don't want to sort of admit defeat a lot of the time, particularly to our superiors, our managers. And that's where you are in a situation where, let's say you've got a good opportunity and you feel in your gut, this is a good opportunity. But in this case, the logic says that it perhaps isn't. So you can read, it's like the opposite. It's like you can read, no, this customer is legit. This customer we are making progress. It's not perhaps going quite as it should in the textbooks, but I feel I've got in my intuition, I feel there's something here. And in those situations, you trust your gut to stay true to what you think is the right next action. And sometimes that's nothing, right? Sometimes we can take a step too far by following up too frequently, by trying to go around the person we're working with to somebody else. And we actually end up at best putting ourselves a step backwards. At worst, we end up, blowing the opportunity up in our face. So sometimes just trusting your gut. I'll say this now, I would never say this years ago when I was earlier in my career, but I've been that salesperson before where my manager's been, beating me up for next steps and things like that. And I've had to lie to them to say, make up stories that I spoke to them or make up stories that I called my champion when I didn't, because I knew that there was nothing to say at that point. So trusting your gut on both sides, I think, is something that I wish that I could just give people a chip just to put in their heads, just to have that confidence to do it.
How do people start to trust their gut? So I feel like that is a common term, right? Trust your gut, trust your gut. How do people start? If I have a deal and they're kind of going kind of quiet, how do I trust, okay, is this because of, they're not interested, it's wrong time? Well, how do I trust that?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So I think a lot of it comes down to the sort of the context that you lay for yourself. So that as you're moving forward, if you're always focusing on making sure you're doing the best version you can of yourself. So every meeting you go into with the customer, you've done the right level of preparation. You've done the right level of follow-up. You've put yourself in the best possible position where there's no doubt that anything could be sort of left to chance. You've just done a great job. Then you put yourself in a position where you can actually start to read, the context of how things are moving forward, whether they've been making progress, and start to make kind of decisions based on that. Also, this is where things like MEDDICC come in, where you can kind of look at the sort of the framework and kind of align the strengths of the opportunity against that, where you stand in terms of value, where you stand in terms of stakeholder engagement, whether you're making progress against their decision process. You can kind of see the different moving parts there.
Right. Collect the data.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. It is. And that point around data, it is something that, like I said, you should always trust your gut. That I don't think you can teach intuition in sales, but your intuition can get better. But the only way it's going to get better is through experience. So the more you kind of put yourself in front of into those situations all the time, I love this idea that sales is basically pattern recognition. It's like game theory. And the more we do it, the more we see all those different pathways that could open up to us. And the more we go down those pathways, we know where they lead, so we can make the right actions when we find ourselves up a dead end as such or something like that.
Right. I love that. And why do you think most people, we've all been in a meeting where it's all hands meeting. We have to go through all of our deals and we have to say where we are in the stage. We're all sitting there. We all have been in all these meetings. And I would say a big percentage of the time, they aren't accurate updates. We're trying to, we're trying to kind of speak a little higher of ourselves. Why do we do that?
Oh, it's a problem we have. It's a major problem because the reality of those situations, in the best possible circumstances, everybody should be behind that person to, whether it's a good opportunity or a bad opportunity, not necessarily a bad opportunity, but an opportunity that's stuck. Everybody should have the goal of making progress from those conversations. And so if we give everybody the benefit of the doubt that that's the situation, that everybody here listening in just wants you to succeed, they want to just hear what's going on so they can give their advice to you, then the only thing that can happen by being honest is you can look good. And I know that sounds really strange, but the more you put your hand up and say, hey, I've got a problem here. This person I'm working with, I just don't think they have the power and influence to be my champion. And I've tried to find other people and I'm not sure if I can see anyone else. That is what good salespeople do, right? Because good salespeople know that sales is not some linear process. It's not just a case of having the best salesperson, best product customer that needs you with budget that means you're going to have the best opportunity. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be challenges. And the salespeople that are the best, they spot the challenges first and get on top of them. So in that circumstance that you explained, you should, like, if you feel compelled to, like you said, like make it sound better than it is. There's other words for what that's called, but like, let's just call it that, embellish it, make it sound better than it is. Then either you yourself need to sort of stop and say, what's the worst that could happen if I really told it like it is? And if the answer to that question is you get in trouble, right? Then you're probably in the wrong place unless, and this goes back to what I said a second ago, unless you haven't followed all the basic steps, unless you haven't prepared well for every meeting, unless you haven't followed up after every meeting, unless you haven't put yourself in that position, like I said before, to be the best version of yourself. If you've done that and the opportunity is not going your way, but you think there's an opportunity there to be won, then you should be like jumping into that meeting, pushing yourself to the front of the agenda and going, hey, everyone, glad you're all here for my deal review or whatever you want to call it. I need your help because there's a deal we can win here together, but I need your help because these things are wrong with it. And let me tell you, any salesperson that does that, everyone in that room goes, wow, they're good. They don't go, oh, they're rubbish at their job because they're in this bad position. They go, they're good. And so that's the culture we want to build.
Do you think it's just being vulnerable is hard? Do you think that there's a level of vulnerability that comes with saying, you know what, I don't know?
Yeah, 100%. Right. There definitely is. And I think this is why I'm seeing this a lot now where I have to be honest and say female sellers are typically, I don't want to stereotype, but typically more comfortable with being vulnerable, more coachable and faster in my experience, put their hands up. And I think that's one of the traits of why we see in so many reports of like higher performance from female salespeople. So that's something there that I think is a really positive thing. But also with I think the I don't know, I forget what generation we're on. I don't follow all that sort of Gen Z or whatever stuff. But the younger generation, if we call it that, seems to have a bit more of that vulnerability as well. So I'm pleased to see it. And that's why we're so passionate at what we do about building the right sales culture, because you can have the best, obviously we think MEDDIC's the best framework in the world, but let's say whatever the best framework in the world is, if you haven't got people able to kind of be confident and, to your point, vulnerable with where they stand, then you might as well not have one. It's actually probably more of a hindrance if you're, making it sound better than it is.
Right. I know it is it's funny because I think most people think that if they're strong, then they're considered smart. But sometimes the people who ask for help, obviously, are the smartest ones in the room. I think Nelson Mandela said it best, that his father was a leader of a tribe and he was the last one to speak, always. His father was the last one to speak as a leader because he believed in the power of vulnerability, of listening to other people and saying, I don't have all the answers. What do you guys have for me? So I love that. What about, Andy, what about for BDRs? What about for people who aren't in these pipeline meetings, but they're kind of doing top of the funnel stuff? How do they qualify out?
Yeah, good question. So, well, first thing I'd say, if I was a BDR, SDR in today's world, I'd be getting into those deal reviews, those meetings as much as I can. I would be like sticking my head around the door. I'll be, if I'm not allowed, I'll be sneaking into the invite and I'd have my name on as like London meeting room 5 or something like that with my camera off, right? So that's the first thing there. I'd be pushing myself in, and any person like that listening in right now, that's the fastest way you can get into the field if that's what you want to do, is just push your way in and make it hard for people to say no to you. And that would be my biggest advice. But when you're working on opportunities, the thing here is this. I mean, I'm by no means in today's world an expert on demand generation, booking meeting, anything like that. I'm the other end of it now. I'm the guy that's receiving all of the inbound stuff. And the one thing I'll say with this sorts of thing is that for me, quality beats quantity all day, every day. I think I will pretty much reply to anything if I get the impression that the person has put the effort in. Now, it may not be that, that I have I have the time to meet them or the interest to meet the person, but when it comes back to why I've taken any meetings out where they've kind of come, I guess, outbound to me, it's because the person's put the time in. And so when you flip your question like that, it's like, well, what is it that is happening in these sort of conversations to make progress? Because I think one thing, we all make this mistake in sales, is where we mistake engagement for progress. where we think, well, this person's talking to us, but actually we're not actually getting any closer to booking a meeting. We're not getting any closer to being introduced to somebody new. And that actually takes up a lot of time because you're putting as much time into a reply where it's going nowhere as you are to maybe researching somebody and reaching out to somebody new. So again, I would say trust your instinct there. And it goes a bit back to what we were just talking about a bit before, being vulnerable, is that nobody at all, I don't care what anybody says, doesn't want you to succeed in the business, right? And so if you are there doing all the right things, doing quality research, quality outbound, whatever it is, part of your role you're doing, and you're not getting the results, the best thing you can do is stick your hand up, because it may not be you. You may have a bad patch. You may have a bad territory. So in those situations, the sooner you put your hand up, the better. The worst thing you can do is kind of just sort of suffer in silence. So yeah, for me, like if I was a BDR today, I would be doing like the things I said. I'll be sneaking into any call I can. I want to get those anecdotes. I want to get those bits of context that are going to help me capture the prospect's attention. But I'd also be best friends with RevOps. I'd want to find out what is the hottest topic right now? What is the hottest territory? How do I, what's what sort of patch or segment has the fastest time from, or the most conversion rate? And I'll be tailoring my activity to make sure I'm focused on wherever the heat is.
Yeah. What I'll be doing. Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. That's great advice. What about the kind of the value selling, the message? What do you think most people kind of get wrong when it comes to that, especially, BDRs and people who are on the top of the funnel?
Yeah. So the thing here is this, and I struggled for a long time with how to articulate how strongly I felt this and put it into the right words. But the thing here is this: the people who care about your product are the worst prospects. Now, let me finish that, because you'll be like, hang on a minute, there's people that don't care, but they don't really care. If you think about the person that cares about whether your feed and speed is 4x or 5x or 7x, right? Or, you've got like a discombobulator or whatever it is that makes your product better than everyone else's. Those people are really bad prospects. They just want to talk about the product. They're not aligned to anyone or anything important in the business, right? So I always say it's like, move away from thinking about the product and seeing if you can zoom in on what things the actual people in the business care about. So you can do this really, really easily, especially with AI now, is just look at a business, look at your prospect and say, what is it they're likely to be doing? What's likely to be their goals? Look at their website, look at their press releases, look at, their financial documents, whatever it is, whatever sort of scale you're looking at, you can get this information, whether it be from local news or national news, and find out what strategies, what initiatives are they driving at the moment, and then think about, well, what from us as an organization, when we work with our customers, what sort of obstacles did we help them overcome that stop them from achieving those goals? And then think about, well, does our product do that? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's focus on the obstacle that's in the way of the person, and zoom in on that, because that's where you're going to get the person's attention, where they're like, for all they've been perhaps struggling all week with a particular obstacle, and you pop up, you sound super relevant, and that's how you capture their attention. If you pop up and go, my product does this, they're not necessarily going to be able to connect it back to the obstacle they've got. So that's it for me. It's always like, forget about the product, think about the customer's problems.
Right. So is it kind of like me, chat, AIing, kind of saying what keeps a CFO up at night when it comes to this problem? And then are you saying they kind of generate answers for you, and then I tie that back to how we can solve it?
Yes. And then the top marks move here is to think about it from a perspective of, with those problems you find, and you don't necessarily have to look outwards for them. You can actually look at your existing customers and go and talk to the sales team and say, hey, what problems do we solve? And so you can kind of find those relevant problems. And again, the more relevance, the better. And so by relevance, I mean, if you're trying to sell to Adidas, and you've got Nike as a customer, then that's going to be really relevant. But like if you're trying to sell to BMW, Nike may not be as relevant as a story, but maybe Mercedes will be. So it's all, layers of relevance there.
Right.
And find those stories and take those stories to the prospective customer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where the magic will happen, because they'll be able to, a few things happen. First off, it's reference selling. It shows you've done your research. It shows that you actually have the full cycle there. You can talk about the before, the after, the without, the with status.
Mm-hmm.
And customers love stories. Everyone loves stories. Everyone loves stories.
Yeah. With what you're saying, it is funny because I do think most salespeople get this advice. It's not about your product, it's about their problems. It's not about your
Right.
product, it's about their pain. Everyone's told this at some point or another. But what is the most common scenario you see good salespeople make when it comes to this? That should know better.
It's the mindset that salespeople sometimes have, where they're like, I know you have this problem, right? I know it. I bet my life on it that you have this problem. I have the solution. And so, like, we should talk, because logic says you got a problem. I've got the solution. We should talk. And what they're doing is they're skipping over. In our world, we would call this like they've identified the pain and then they're just presenting the solution, right? But they haven't got into, there's two other stages to get to. So there's identifying the pain, and then there's indicating to the person that is what this pain is costing you, in terms of lost revenue, or, deficiencies in your efficiency or anything like that, whatever those things are. And then there's a third stage, which is like the implications of like, what does that mean to you? Right.
Mm.
I'll give you a great example of this. Somebody was introduced to me by a former boss of mine, a great person. And so they said, "Oh, this person's just starting out. Would you take a call with them? And they want some advice and stuff." And we've been here before, right? I'm time poor. So I'm trying to qualify what's going on here. And the person kind of, when I sort of pushed back, because it sounded like they just wanted some free consulting, they actually came back and said, no, I can help you save some money on your payments. And I'm like, well, what payments? Like, you don't even know if I have payments. And I'm sure you probably can save me money on those payments, but you haven't got to anywhere near to what the implications of what it would mean for me to be overpaying on payments are. And so that's the problem I think that salespeople make, is they see the pain, their eyes light up because they go, I can solve it. And they probably are right. It's probably a no-brainer that they should buy your solution. But it doesn't work like that. If that was the case, then you and I wouldn't have jobs, because there'd just be like a brochure that would go out when it would explain how we help solve the problem, and the customers would buy it.
Right. So do you think it's them not getting to the point faster? Like, do you think that guy maybe was not asking you the questions to kind of implicate the pain?
Yeah, exactly that.
Okay.
It's just the idea of just getting straight into the identification of pain, right? Good, we're there. That's checked off. And it's like this checklist manifesto sort of mindset. Let's now get into we've done the discovery, we found the pain. Now let's get to the selling stages. And then once we've got the selling stages done, we can get to the closing stages. If it's like bump, bump, bump. And we know it's not like that.
Right. It's not linear. That's very true. Well, Andy, it's been great chatting with you. I have one last question for you. So, obviously just starting out, myself and everyone kind of listening, think about 22-year-old Andy, or maybe whenever you entered into sales, I know you had a career before. Whenever you're entering into the sales world, young Andy, you have a terrible day. You're looking at yourself in the mirror being, oh gosh, the sales thing is hard. What advice would you give yourself to keep going?
Oh, what a great question. You know what? I don't think my answer to that question would be any different to what I would tell myself now, in terms of like when you have a bad day. So something I've started doing is, well, a couple of things. I started like almost like a journal where I've printed out basically nice things, not necessarily people complimenting me or anything quite like that, but more like where I've seen, affirmations is a part of it for sure, but also things like where I've seen positive things happen, things that make me feel happy, things that make me feel proud of the work that I've done. In my more recent role, it's less directly things I've done, but it's part of me being able to see the fruits of the broader labor and things like that, and being able to look at that and be able to say, like, just to take that in, almost like, and I don't do it too often. It's almost like I almost see it as a bit like a drug. I don't want to get some sort of what's it called when you get the it doesn't have the same effect so much. You come used to it. So it's like that. But here, and it does say, "This too shall pass" on the front, which is something I have also on my arm as well.
Oh my gosh, what's so funny is I've been telling myself that for the last like 3 weeks.
There you go.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a very, very, I love the idea. And also I have I have this in the front. I don't know if this will show up on the camera, but it just says, "Did it pass? Yes or no?"
Oh, I love that.
And you can see it
You
there.
know,
So
yeah.
it's just like a check to myself. If I'm feeling like, this is bad or this is challenging, whatever it is, I'll come back and I go, did it pass? Yeah, actually it did. And so just kind of keeping myself in check. So I know it's not necessarily the most sales related question, but if I bring it back to
I love
sales,
that though. Yeah.
yeah.
It's like kind of like the Ted Lasso thing, like be a goldfish. Like nothing lasts for forever. Even if you're having a hard day, it's going to pass. If you're having a good day or a good season, that's also going to pass. It's not sunny
Yeah.
and rainbows forever. So I love
So
that.
I tell you something a little bit like that. I have got this too shall pass, but I've also no one else has seen this yet on any like media or anything. But this is a Tetris piece. It's the
Okay.
long, thin Tetris piece.
Uh-huh.
Because just like what you said, how Ted Lasso put it, in my mind, those that play Tetris, you play the whole time waiting for that long, thin bit to come along.
Yeah.
And you're like, come on, anytime now, it's going to come along. And then it comes along and there's like 3 of them at once. And then it's gone again. And it's like, it's a similar version in my mind of
The
what
goldfish.
you just said there. So
Yeah.
I think it's
I
really
love
fun.
that. I love that. Wow. I love tattoo meetings. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much, Andy. I really appreciate you for being on this podcast, but also giving me this opportunity to have a podcast with you and with MEDDIC. So I really appreciate it.
This for me, this is legacy. This is Miller legacy. And I love it. I absolutely love that I get to be a teeny part of it. So
Thank you.
I'm excited. And I think this is going to be huge. So well done to you.
Thanks. Thank you.